who am I kidding? I don't even go outside. Hello there, my gorgeous friends on the internet. I'm happy to announce to you that I'm getting very close to the completion. No, that sounds weird. To the completion of the course, of the JavaScript course. So what I thought I'm gonna do is share a small part of it here on YouTube for you to enjoy and see if you like it. We're gonna talk about asynchronous JavaScript. It's a harder topic to kind of understand, but I try to simplify it as much as possible. So again, this is a small chapter to kind of get you up and running with it, and then in the course we're going to start building out projects and all of those good stuff. Again, I have like 20 hours filmed. It's going to be amazing. Next week I'm going to start sharing like everything that I have in the course, see if you like it and everything, and yeah, that's going to be it. So enjoy this part and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, in this chapter we are going to talk about asynchronous JavaScript and how that is useful for us. So a big thing that you're going to see on the internet is something called AJAX. So what is AJAX? AJAX means asynchronous JavaScript and XML. What is XML? We don't care because nobody uses XML anymore. But XML is basically a format, a lightweight, easy way format that people use to kind of send data from server to the browser or from server to another server and things of that sort, okay? But again, we're not going to be using XML, we're going to be using something called JSON, all right? Which is, again, just another format of sending data, a common way, because you're going to see that we have to send data from like a server to our browser. And the thing is that a lot of programming languages can use that, right? They can get some data and it has to have some kind of common syntax, all right? Again, let's not worry about that right now. We're gonna get into that in just a bit. Let's just worry about asynchronous JavaScript. What is asynchronous JavaScript and why do we use it? So far, everything we've been writing mostly was synchronous. So how is asynchronous useful? Well, take a look. The normal behavior of a website is, let me see something here. Let's just pull up a page or something. I don't know, like let's click here on Dribble. Let's go to Dribble. Okay, why is this zoomed out? Okay, there we go. So the normal behavior is like you go here, you click on something, and when you click on something, that data gets back from a server and the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript automatically updates. Right, so if I click here, it's gonna fetch that page, it's gonna fetch all the information on that page, and it's gonna bring it back and it's gonna update everything for us. AJAX allows us to kind of make these requests to get data from a server in the background. And what you get is this kind of live update view. So for example, if I search on YouTube here, if I search tool, as you can see, everything is live updating here. All right, and this is some data that's getting back from some Google servers. So as soon as I start writing, as you can see, this automatically updates without actually clicking on something or like having to refresh the page to get the whole data back. All right, so it's basically dynamic data that's coming back for us. All right, and this is super useful. I can even show you here on Can I Use. So again, this is kind of a website that shows you basically compatibility of the browsers of like different features. So if I search Flexbox, as you can see, as soon as I start typing, everything automatically updates here, all the HTML, the CSS. See? So again, what's happening in the background, basically, it's using AJAX. It's sending some kind of request to a server, and that server gets back the information in a format. All right, so again, we get that information back in a format called JSON. All right, and we take that JSON format that contains all the data, we turn it, we parse it into JavaScript usable code, and then we just update the information on the screen, just like this. Okay, so that's kind of the goal behind it. Now let's take a look on how asynchronous code actually looks. Okay, so let's quickly just recap on how synchronous code looks in JavaScript, all right? And then I'm going to show you how asynchronous code looks. So let's do a sync code example. All right, so let's just do simple, super simple console logs. So this is the start here, console log end. All right, and remember, if we add a function and we invoke it, so let's just do a function here, other functionality, like that. I'm just gonna do console log. We are in another function, console log, do some stuff. All right, and that's it. So what happens if I call it, let's call it here, right in the middle. Okay, so again, synchronous code, again, JavaScript is gonna read your code line by line, all right? JavaScript is pretty bad at reading code, so it can only do it one line at a time. So it goes from here to here, all right? It checks this function, it adds it to the memory, then it console log starts, and when we invoke a function, if you remember, we basically create a new execution context. So when we invoke a function, we go inside a function. So we start reading this function, we start reading, not this function, this console log and this thing. And finally, when we're done with the function, it closes, right? It gets popped off of that call stack that we talked about. And again, the call stack is kind of a way for JavaScript to keep track of all your execution context. Basically, when this code starts running at the beginning, right, your file actually starts getting read, this call stack, this main gets added, this main execution context gets added, which is gonna start reading your whole file here, right? So it starts here, all right, it adds this to memory, it adds console log on top of the call stack here. So it's gonna do something like console log, all right, let me make this smaller, 100, all right? Then this one finishes. So after this finishes running, this function, it gets popped off, all right? So it gets deleted, bam, and then we invoke other function. So now what we do is we add other function on top of the call stack, all right? Just like that. Now our main is not gonna continue running, all right? So we're not continuing down here at the console log end. We jump into this other function execution context. All it means is that we're gonna go here, we're gonna console log this out, console log this out, and now the function is done, all right? So it gets popped off of this stack, so it gets removed. And finally, we console log out end. All right, so this gets added now here. So let's do just a console log. All right, this gets added now here. And after this is done, then everything gets removed and we are done. Okay? And we can see this in action. I'm just gonna run it here in Node app.js. All right, so we have start, and then we do the other stuff. All right, so everything that we have in the function because we invoked it, and then we run end. Okay, so super normal behavior. Now let's take a look on how asynchronous code runs. So I'm gonna remove everything. Actually, let's just remove this and this. I'm gonna rename this to async. All right, now there are specific async things that we can do here. So one of those are set timeout. All right, so this is a specific thing that is going to do async operations. So I'm going to add set timeout here, which takes a callback function, just like that. I'm going to add a delay of 2000 seconds. All right, so now every code that we write in here is going to be asynchronous. So I'm going to console log, we are in the timeout. Again, all this thing does is it's going to delay the code in here by 2 seconds. All right, if I hit save and I run this code, how do you think it's gonna run? Do we get start, we wait 2 seconds, and then we get end? So hopefully that's clear. So we console log the start, then we wait 2 seconds, we get we are in the timeout, and then we get end. Well, let's take a look. And no, that's not what's happening. Take a look, we have start, end, and then we are in a timeout. So let's run this again. I'm gonna add 5 seconds now. Run, start, end, and take a look. Now we are in a timeout. So it didn't actually block the code here, right? It didn't stop at this moment and then run down here. But if we learned about like how the call stack works, this doesn't really make any sense because we learned that, okay, well, let's go back at this example. So our main script tag here starts running. We add the console log first. So we have start running, right? Console log. Again, let's make this smaller. And that's too small. No, not that small. All right, we have the console log. This finishes running, so it gets removed. And then we run the set timeout function, set timeout. All right, so this starts running. But then again, we cannot run console log here, right? We have to wait for this one to finish before we can run the other one. So what's going on here? Why is this running right after? And then this kind of just pops in randomly. So what's happening is, again, JavaScript is very bad at kind of doing multitasking, all right? It can only do one thing at a time. It's a single-threaded programming language, so it can only read code line by line. But there's actually something else going on. We have the browser, because we're running JavaScript in the browser. So there are these things called web APIs that can handle those things separately for us. So when we call this set timeout, JavaScript is basically going to pass this timeout inside this web APIs. And the browser is basically going to keep track of the time here. All right, so we kind of pop this set timeout off the call stack. So we remove it and we pass it here. This is going to keep a timer, and then we continue running our code. All right, so it doesn't block the code. We continue running everything, and these asynchronous codes get passed to the web APIs. So now here, console log gets ran, the finished one, right? Console log, the last one down here. And once this is done, this gets popped off. All right, so this gets removed. And at the end, when the set timeout, like 5 seconds pass, it gets pushed back onto the call stack and it runs. It runs our callback right here. All right, so hope that clarifies things. So we even saw, like, when we add a click listener, right? Add event listener on click. Well, shouldn't this kind of like block the code? Why can we like read the rest of the code? Shouldn't we wait for the user to click on something? Well, again, things like this, like a click listener, that also is passed here in the web APIs. And this keeps track on when the user clicks. And when the user clicks, then our callback function gets executed and it's going to be passed onto the call stack, so it gets invoked. Okay, so that's kind of behind the scenes, and there are a few things here that are asynchronous, such as set timeout. We're going to take a look at fetching data, or fetch, I should say. That's what it's called. That is also asynchronous, set timeout, set interval, and things of that sort. Now, you're going to see that they have this pattern of having a callback function, right? So set timeout or set interval, they all use a callback function, because after that certain period of time, or when we get, or even when we fetch some data from the internet, once that data is available, then we want to kind of manipulate it or run it in a callback function. And we're going to take a look at this in the next episode. But I just want to quickly mention that callbacks are not necessarily always asynchronous. So for example, if we have an array here, const, let's just do items is equal to, let's just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? If I do a items.forEach, well, forEach here takes a callback function as well, like that, right? It's callback. And here I have access to all the item, each individual item. So I can console log item. All right, so take a look here. In this callback, this is going to be ran before we get here to the end. All right, it's not going to be asynchronous. So if we run this, start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then end. All right, so it's going to loop over this until it finishes before we get down here. Okay, so I just want to mention that you're going to have callback functions that they're not necessarily all of them are asynchronous. They can be synchronous too. Okay, so let's get into an example on how we can create or kind of like simulate asynchronous code. Okay, in this one, let's try to give like kind of simulate an example on how it would be for you to get some data back from a server. Okay, so let me kind of show you a problem that we might have if you try to write code synchronously. So if I do something like start, all right, this is kind of just so we can see what's going on, where the start and the finish is, just like that. And in here, I'm just going to create a function. And let's say we're trying to log in a user. So I'm going to say login user. All right. And let's say this takes an email and a password. Okay. And let's say when we log in a user, we want to get back the email. So what I'm going to do is just set the timeout. Again, this is kind of, we're simulating like this is going to take some time to come back. All right, so we're just gonna pass in an arrow function in here. Come on, Mr. Arrow function. There we go. All right, so in here, what we would do is, let's say we just want to return the email. So I'm gonna just return, I'm gonna create an object here, just user email is gonna be set to the email that we're gonna receive. All right, so let's say we're trying to log in the user, and let's just say it takes 1,500 milliseconds. Again, we don't know like how much is it gonna take when we're actually working with a real server or with an API. But let's just say this one takes 1,500 seconds. Okay, so we cannot do something like that. Like we cannot get this information like this. Const user is equal to login user. I'm gonna pass in the email and the password. So let's do developedbyed@gmail.com. It's a real thing, I promise, and my password is 12345 6. All right, so what's happening here? We're invoking the function and I want to return the email, right? We're passing this email, so I want to have this here, right? We're returning it. The thing is that this comes back after some time. In this case, 1,500. So if I try to console log user down here, you're gonna see that it's not gonna work. Yeah, where's the browser? Let's just do it here. So if I run this node app, start, undefined, and finished. So as you can see, user gave us undefined. Why? Again, the information did not come back yet when we console log the user down here. All right, this took too much time. So if I do something like 5,000 here, all right, we get start, finish, undefined, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is when the actual information gets back. And to see that, I can even add a console log in this set timeout. So I can say, now we have the data. But when I try to access it down here, I did not have it. So run, start, undefined, finish. Let's wait a bit. And now we have the data, all right? So how can we get around this issue? All right, we cannot run synchronous style code here because we don't have the data. So what we can do is we can pass in a callback, all right? Callback functions are super important. Again, a callback function is just a function that's passed in as a parameter that's gonna run later on in a later time. So what we do is we pass in a callback function here. All right, this is gonna be a function. So now I can add a comma here and invoke that function, right? So I can pass in a curly brackets and parentheses, right? So this is the function that I'm invoking here. So now what I say, rather than returning here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wrap this thing in a callback, all right? So now I'm passing this user email as a parameter in this function here that I'm calling back. So here I will have access to that user, all right? And I can do user.user email. So here I can say console log user dot, let's just do user, okay? So recap, we just pass in a callback function here, all right, which is here. And once the data come back, so when the set timeout here runs, we invoke that callback function, which triggers all of the functionality in here. So in here is where we actually have access to the user. So let's take a look now. Let's run this node app, start, finish. And look at that, after 5 seconds, boom, we have the data and I get the correct data in here. User email, developedbyed, blah, blah, blah. All right. So there we go. That's kind of the idea behind it. We pass these callback functions. Now you might also want to do something else. Like once you get back the user, you might also want to get his videos. So let's create another function. Let's see how that looks. Function get user videos. All right, and here, let's say it takes an email parameter. So we take a look at the email and let's just fake a timeout here as well. Let's say getting the videos takes, that's quite fast. It just takes 1,000 milliseconds. Okay, so here again, if I do return, let's do video 1, just a simple array, video 2, video 3. Okay, so we return something. Again, if I want to run this after I get the user information back, what I would do is again add a callback to this. So go to the get user videos, add a comma callback. just like that. All right. And what you do is you replace the return here with the callback. So when you invoke this function, after I get back the user details, so here's where I get back the user detail. After I get back the user detail, I can get that user's videos, and I can pass in user dot, let's see here what we had, user email, right? So user dot user email, and the second parameter, if we take a look here, again, take a look, it's the callback. So I'm gonna add another callback here, like that, and here we have access to the actual videos, like that. Console log videos. All right, let's see how this looks. Run, oops, messed it up. Oh my goodness, why you do this? Run this, start, finish. All right, we get this back after 5 seconds, the user, and as soon as we get back the user, we start getting the video back. So let's just add 2 seconds here and 3 seconds here. Let's make this shorter. Okay, 1, 2, 3, we get the user back. As soon as we get the user back, it's trying to fetch the videos, which takes 2 seconds. Now the problem is that when you try to fetch things like multiple times, so I want to fetch the user, then his videos, and then maybe like video details. I can add another one here, function video details. All right, this one takes in a video and a callback. I'm just gonna kind of duplicate the functionality here. All right, so when you keep stacking these things, let's say this just gives us back the title of the video, or something, right? So here, what we can do is do another one, after I get back all the videos, I want to get back, let's say, video 0, and then we pass again another callback here. So here we have access to this in here. So the title or the description, console log title. So as you can see, you get in this weird nested structure of callbacks and callbacks and callbacks, and invoking functions that have a callback, invoking functions and a callback, and they have this weird structure. Now imagine like you're trying to get more and more data, so you're invoking more of these, and you get into this weird look at this, like in this weird ass structure, kind of like a pyramid here, or triangle. And this is something that is referred to as callback hell. All right, is when you keep stacking these things one on top of each other, and it's very hard to read, and you don't know, it's hard to read and you don't know what's going on. All right, so in the next chapters, we're gonna take a look on how we can fix this and make this easier using promises, and we're also gonna take a look at async await. All right, so this is kind of a general idea of how asynchronous code works. Again, don't worry, we're gonna get into more detail in the next episode. And yeah, hope you enjoyed this one. One thing that we haven't factored in this code is when we request some data from like a database or just an API, is that we might not necessarily always get back the correct data. We might get an error or something. So here, in our cases, when we're trying to log in the user, we're just trying to send the data back. But what happens if it fails or something? So what we would do here with the callbacks is we would add something like an on success. All right, and we would pass this in here as the callback. So on success, we want to run this. Otherwise, we would have also an on failure function here. All right. And basically we would do something like if we have a failure or something, if on failure or something wrong happens here, then we would have to also run some kind of code. All right, so this becomes extremely complex and successful. So what that means is down here, besides running this arrow function, we would have to run another callback function to kind of handle the error too. All right, so this becomes super complicated here. So let's take a look at promises, which kind of simplifies everything for us. Let me just add back callback here for a simple example. Okay, so let's refactor this using promises. Actually, let's just do a simple example here, and then we're going to refactor this whole thing using promises. So what is a promise? A promise is just an object that basically gives us back either a result of an asynchronous operation or a failure of a asynchronous operation. Kind of like this, kind of like what we did here, very similar. So what we're gonna do is, let's just create a promise right now, all right? I'm just gonna call this promise. all right, and set this equal to a new promise. All right, this is going to be an object here, kind of a constructor function, and this takes into parameters, kind of like what I showed you right now, a kind of a on success and on failure. So if we get the data back successfully, then do something with it. If we don't get it back successfully, then I don't know, display an error message or do something with it. So the two keywords here that a promise uses is resolve. So that's kind of if like it's successful, and reject if we have a problem. All right, so we'll run a arrow function here. And now, again, I'm gonna kind of simulate, I'm gonna add a set timeout here to kind of simulate getting some data back from an API or something. Let's do 2 seconds. So here what you would do is if you successfully got the data back, you would run resolve. So I'm gonna resolve, I'm just gonna pass in, like, let's say we get back a user, add here, okay? And that's it. So this is how we create the promise, but there's another step here, kind of like here, right? We have to kind of consume it. We have to execute the code when we try to get back the information. So this is the creation of a promise, and now we consume the promise. So what we do is we just call promise, and we're not doing any crazy stuff here like this, all right? What we just do is we use promise and we add a dot then. And in this dot then, we have the information. So the result here. So I have the result or the user or whatever. I just gonna run an arrow function and I can console log user and hit save. And let's take a look. Does that work? Run this. Oops. Let's also add a console log here. Console log got the user. Hit save. Let's run this. Keep messing it up. There we go. Start finish. And after 2 seconds, all right, we got an error. Let's take a look on success. Oh, I'm trying to run that file. Let's try to run node promise.js. Okay, and there we go. After 2 seconds, we got back the actual user. So as you can see, the syntax is much, much cleaner and easier to read. Now, we can also, let's say we get an error back from the API or something. What we can do is let's just add a reject here. All right, so let's say this doesn't resolve and it gets rejected. So I'm gonna say reject, and I'm gonna pass in an error here. Now, a good practice to do that is to add a new error. All right, this is an error object. It doesn't really have to do anything with the promise because we can create this in JavaScript. I'm just gonna pass in here a new error. Okay, and this is gonna have like a random message. Let's just say we're gonna display something on the screen, like user not logged in. Okay, and hit save. So now, how can we handle that? So dot then here gives us back the result, but we can also chain here. So after the dot then, I can add another dot, and we can say dot catch. And here we have access to the actual error. So I can do console log error. All right, so we just chain things together like that. So this, we run this if we get the information back successfully, and we run this if we don't. So now if we run this again, this should give us an error right now. And there we go, user not logged in. All right, so we get an error. And if I want to access only the message here, you can just do error dot message here. Let's run this again. There we go, user not logged in. All right, so it's a super nice and clean syntax of running this. But in our case here, we kind of chain together multiple things, like get the log in the user, and after you log in the user, get his videos, and after we get the videos, get the video details. So we're going to refactor this whole code to use this promise syntax. Okay, so let's do that in the next one. Okay, let's go back to this original example and see how we can refactor this code because it looks nasty. So refactor this whole thing and make it look nice with promises. So let's comment everything out here like that. So what we would do is, rather than doing this callback thing here, just get rid of it. All right, down here as well, just get rid of all these ugly callbacks. Nobody likes them. Okay, now what we do is we return a promise. So let's return here a new promise like that. And again, if you remember, we have access to resolve and reject. So let's run this, and now we just pass this whole timeout in here. Okay, and again, remember, if you get the data back, you would just pass in resolve. So we would pass in resolve here, and that's it. That's the whole thing. And down here as well, we can do the same thing. So here, let's just say return a new promise. All right, we can pass in resolve and reject. And we can run an arrow function, just pass everything here. If we get the result back, then we resolve it. Same here. Let's do return a new promise. All right, we pass in resolve, reject. If we get the data back, again, we don't use callback anymore, we just resolve it. And that's it. So let's take a look on this ugly, because this is super ugly here. How can we make this nicer? So look at that, this is super simple. We have login user, right? So login user, again, if it returns us a promise, and you're gonna find this a lot of times, like when you request data from an API, you don't even have to write these up here, because a request is going to return you a promise automatically, but here we just manually wrote it. So how can we write this code out? Well, take a look. Login user, all right, this takes in an email and the password. Boomba is the password. And if it returns a promise, and you're going to find that in a lot of cases when you make requests to an API or something, you don't even have to write out the promises like this, right? It just comes back. It's going to return a promise automatically, so you don't even have to write this out. So again, here we're consuming it. So all we do, since this returns a promise, is we just add a .then. So I'm going to just hit enter and go down to a new line. And here we have access to the user. All right, user here, and I have access to it. I can console log out the user, and it's going to work just fine. But what if I want to do kind of what we did here, when as soon as I got the user, I also want to get the video details. So I just get user videos here, user videos, like that. And I can pass in the user.email from here. And again, this returns me a promise. So I can just add another .then. I get the videos, I can do something with the videos, I can get back the video details if I want. I can pass in video 0, for example, the first one, video 0. And .then, I have access to all the details. Console log detail, I just console log that out at the end. Detail, like that. Okay, so this is the same thing as this, but take a look how easier this is to read comparative to this one. Let's run this, node app.js, start, finish. All right, this is gonna take a bit of time. We have the data, and we're gonna get back the title in just a bit. There we go, title of the video down here. Okay, so again, way nicer, way simpler than this whole stack of code. And there's actually a much easier way of writing this whole thing out, because wouldn't it be nice still? The best example of this would be to kind of write everything out synchronously, something like something that we're used to doing. Like, what if I can just do something like user is equal to login user, and then pass in ed and boomba, or whatever, blah, 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 right? Wouldn't it be nice to just write the code like this somehow? And then I have access to the videos that's equal to like video details, and just pass in the user from here, right? User email or something like that. Like, this is the nicest way, kind of like synchronous style of writing code rather than this. Even though this is nice, this is terrible and I don't like this, but wouldn't it be nice to do it this way? And there is a way, something called Async Await. It's kind of like a syntactical sugar, and if you don't know what that means, it's kind of like it still uses promises, but it's just a nicer and easier way for us to write asynchronous code. All right, so the people over at JavaScript were like, hey, let's make this even nicer and easier to read. So we're going to take a look on how we can add Async Await to kind of simplify and make this code nicer. So again, it doesn't really change anything in the background. It's still going to use promises, but it's just an easy and simple syntax for us to write it. Okay, so let's do that in the next one. Oh, just very quickly, I want to show you something else. What we're doing here is we are getting back the user information, and we're waiting for the user information. Once we get that back, then we're doing something with the videos, and then we're doing something with the detail. There's also a way, like, what if I want to get some data from YouTube or from Facebook, but I want to kind of run them at the same time. I don't want to have to wait for one specific thing to start executing the other thing, right? Because here we have to wait, like, let's say this takes 2 seconds. I have to wait for this one to kind of get back for me to start finding the videos, right? So what if I want to start getting data from YouTube and Facebook at the same time? So what we can do, let me just go back here. I'm going to comment this out very quickly. So you can imagine, like, we have something from YouTube. I'm just going to do const YouTube, new promise. Let's say this is going to return me a resolve. All right, set timeout. All right, then I'm going to pass in here, I don't know, console log getting stuff from YouTube. And then I resolve, and let's say we get back, yeah, let's just say we get back some videos here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 videos. Okay. Okay, and this is gonna take us 2 seconds. All right, and let's do the same thing, kind of copy paste this here to to Facebook. Let's say we want to get back some info from there. Kind of the same thing from getting stuff from Facebook. All right, and here let's just say we get back kind of like a user or something with a name or something. Okay, super simple. So if I want to run these at the same time and I want to get back both information, what we can do is we can use promise.all. All right, and here we pass in an array like that, and we just pass in YouTube and Facebook like that, and then we have .then result. All right, I like to drop this in a new line, by the way, when I do .then result. We can run an arrow function and console log it out. All right, so now what's happening is this starts getting the data as soon as this starts getting the data as well. Okay, so they both kind of start running almost at the same time, and we don't have to wait for this one to get the data and then start fetching for this one. They kind of both execute at the same time. So when we run this, we can just get back the data as fast as possible, just like that. Look at that, we have the user and we also have the videos from up here. Okay, now one thing to note is if one of them takes longer, so if this takes like 3,000, the result is not going to come back until both of these promises are fulfilled. Both of them return us, both of them resolve basically. So take a look, if we wait 1, 2, this should come back already, but it doesn't, getting stuff from YouTube. It has to wait for this one. So let me add the delay a bit bigger, 5,000 here. So we can do again, getting stuff from YouTube. So as you can see, it doesn't give us the data back until we also get back from Facebook. Okay, so there we go. This is promise.all. It's meant so you can start executing more asynchronous code at the same time or almost at the same time. And yeah, it can be useful in certain cases. So I thought I'd show you this one as well. Okay, let's take a look at Async Await. This is going to be the last one, the last theoretical section on the page here, because after that we're going to actually start building out some examples and stuff like that. Okay, so what we're going to do here is let's get rid of this whole thing and just go back here, all right, to kind of refactor this whole thing to make it look like synchronous code, like code that we like to look at. So what I'm going to do is just create a function here, and I want to like call everything in here. All right, function, let's say display user. All right, I'm going to call display user down here. All right, and take a look. We're just going to write like async style code. What we're going to do is say const logged user. All right, so kind of like this here, or login user, I should say. Login user is equal to, and we're going to just call login user. Like that. I can pass in the email and the password, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now, since this is not going to work, as you know, using async await, what you can do is just go here at the beginning and just say await. And that's it. All right, now what you can do is just go here to a new line and you can use this login user. It's going to have the data. All right, so what you can do is just say const videos is equal to await get user videos, and I can pass in the login user dot user email, right? So from here, again, if I want to get the video details, now I can just use the videos here. So const detail is equal to await video details. All right, and I can pass in video 0. Okay, and that's it. That's how it works. It's super simple. I can console log out the detail if I want down here. Okay, there's one last thing though that we need to do is we need to explicitly tell JavaScript that this is going to be asynchronous code that's going to be running here. So besides this await, we need to go here to the function at the beginning of it and just say async. All right, this is an asynchronous function that's going to run some asynchronous code in here. But that's it. That's generally it. You just add async before the function and you add await, and you are done. Let's take a look. Does this work? Run. All right, that's going to give us an error. What's going on? And cannot access login user. So let's see. All right, let's comment this out. Login user. Okay, let's see what's up. Run this again. Okay, cannot access before. All right, so what's the error here? Okay, I have the same name here. I'm stupid. Let's call this logged user and pass in here logged user. There we go. All right, let's run this again. There we go. So now it works. So start. All right, it's gonna get the data and it's gonna just give us back the title. So you're gonna see that it works the same way, but we use kind of the synchronous style of writing code that we like and we're used to, compared to like this arrow callback function nightmare, or even this .then syntax. Okay, so it's a very nice and simple way of writing asynchronous code that we're gonna be using. Okay, so that's kind of the general idea. Now, how can we do the error handling, like the dot catch and all that stuff? Like, how can I make sure, like, what happens if I have an error here, all right? What you can do is you can wrap this in a try catch. So try to run this code like that, and if it doesn't work, then catch the error, and then here we can do something like display the error to the user, or do something like that. We could not get the videos, all right? Something like that, or we can just console log the error that we have here, all right? So you would just wrap it in a try and catch in case the code in here fails and you cannot get the logged in user, or you cannot get the videos, or whatever, okay? So those are the basics of callbacks, of promises, async await, and all of this good stuff. Okay. In the next part, again, we're gonna stop being theoretical and actually start doing some practical things, because this can be hella boring and we want to do actual things, right? We just don't want to learn theory. We actually want to build out fun stuff. All right, so that's what we're gonna do in the next section.